What if your father gave you an ultimatum so brutal it could collapse your marriage, shatter your public image, and erase your entire legacy, just like that? This wasn't a joke. This wasn't tabloid fluff. This was King Charles, 1 minute ago, throwing down the most dramatic gauntlet the royal family has seen since the days of abdication. A moment so seismic that insiders say it could redraw the royal map and push Prince Harry into an irreversible choice. Return completely to the royal fold, or be cut off entirely, forever. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But how did it get to this point? And more importantly, why now? That's the question rattling every palace hallway, every Montecito phone line, and every royal commentator's lips across the globe. Because this wasn't just a private family matter anymore. This was a decision with global consequences. One with echoes of scandal, betrayal, legacy, and power plays. And behind the velvet curtains of royal diplomacy lies a boiling pot of resentment, secrecy, and desperation, finally bubbling over. You might be thinking, haven't we seen this before? Harry and Meghan left. They've spoken out. The damage was done. So why would Charles, King Charles, already fighting battles on multiple fronts, risk reigniting the most controversial family war of the 21st century? Simple. Because this time, silence isn't an option. This time, a line had to be drawn. And that line, it's not just a polite suggestion. It's a razor-thin ultimatum. Return to royal duty completely, with all the rules, expectations, and limitations that come with it. Or walk away forever, stripped of everything. Titles, patronages, protection, even a spot in the family's inner circle. It's a decision that could fracture the monarchy from the inside out. But let's rewind. Because behind every royal announcement is a mountain of pressure, and this one is no exception. Let's talk about what triggered this, because this wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't emotional. It was calculated. It was planned. And according to palace insiders, it's been building for months. Whispers began circulating after a royal source spotted a flurry of quiet meetings at Clarence House. Meetings Charles held with his senior aides, private legal counsel, and even a few old-school courtiers from the Queen Elizabeth era. People who rarely show their faces publicly, but whose opinions still carry massive weight behind palace walls. So what changed? According to one insider, Charles had simply run out of patience. The Sussex saga, he allegedly told aides, had become an open wound, constantly leaking into headlines, podcasts, and public sympathy battles. The monarchy, still reeling from scandal fatigue, health rumors, and a glaring lack of unity, couldn't afford another round of quiet diplomacy. It was time to act. And the plan? Give Harry a stark choice, one that offered no gray area, no wiggle room, and no space for spin. Either come back fully, meaning official royal duties, media silence, and total alignment with palace protocol, or be permanently removed from the institution. Not just distanced, removed, erased. That meant no more Duke of Sussex, no more His Royal Highness, no more security assistance, logistical coordination, or behind-the-scenes leverage, and no more being half in, half out. Sound familiar? That's because Harry once proposed that exact structure himself during Megxit, to be half royal, half independent. The Queen, diplomatic to her final breath, softened the blow by saying, "You remain much loved." But she didn't accept the deal. Now Charles, no longer the Prince of Wales but the actual king, has taken that rejection a step further. He's giving Harry a second chance to be all in, or a final shove to be all out. And what makes this so much more explosive than before? Timing. This decision wasn't leaked during a slow news cycle. It wasn't planted as a trial balloon. It was delivered, clearly, cleanly, and with almost surgical precision, after one particularly jarring development. A private phone call Harry allegedly made to William weeks ago, trying to find common ground. Except what he got back was silence. Chilling, royal silence. And that's when Charles decided to intervene. Not with empathy, but with a power move. Because if Harry's calls to William went nowhere, and Meghan's Netflix production calendar was filling up again, then the king knew exactly what was coming next. Another wave of Sussex headlines. Another expose. Another documentary. And possibly another book. Charles wasn't going to wait. He was going to strike before the narrative could be shaped. before Harry and Meghan's team could spin it into a saga of victimhood or royal cruelty. But here's where things get even darker. This wasn't just a royal father giving his son tough love. This was a monarch protecting an institution. An institution that, despite its gold trimmings and grand carriages, is bleeding influence. An institution that now, more than ever, needs unity, clarity, and control. And Harry? He represented chaos. Not because he was evil, not because he was wrong, but because he refused to play by the rules everyone else accepted without question. And so Charles gave him a final option. Option 1. Return. Completely. Wear the uniforms. Do the duties. Follow the script. Make no political statements. And the memoirs. No podcasts. No interviews. No more private documentaries or ghost-written essays. Option 2. Decline. And face complete, irreversible detachment. And here's the emotional gut punch. It wasn't just Charles making this decision. Rumors suggest Camilla was involved. That William quietly signed off. That royal advisors were consulted. That even Princess and, known for her no-nonsense approach to duty, told Charles, if he's not in, he's out. There's no third way anymore. No third way. That's the phrase echoing inside the palace right now. And if you've been paying attention, you'll notice something chilling. The tone has changed. This isn't about reconciliation anymore. It's about boundaries. It's about preservation. But here's the twist, and it's a massive one. Insiders claim Harry was given a strict deadline to respond. Not weeks. Days. 30, to be exact. 30 days to make a decision that could either restore his standing in the monarchy or sever him from it forever. And this wasn't just a letter, either. Sources claim this final offer was delivered by hand to Harry in California, via a trusted royal courier. No emails, no assistance, no chance for interception or manipulation. A physical letter, with a seal, from the king. If that sounds theatrical, that's because it is. But royal protocol lives on theatrics, and Charles knows exactly how to use them. What no one expected, though, was what came next, because Harry didn't immediately respond. Instead, silence. And from Meghan's team? Nothing. Not a word. Not a tweet. Not even a quiet leak to a friendly outlet. Just stillness, which, in this world, is deafening. Was it strategy? Shock? Or something far more complicated? Well, here's where things get truly wild. Because the minute the news of this ultimatum leaked, just minutes ago, in fact, something else happened. The official royal website was updated. Go ahead. Check it. Rumors began swirling online about subtle changes. Tweaks to titles, rearranged pages, photos removed from certain bios, and small edits to royal timelines. Coincidence? Doubtful. Because in the royal family, nothing is updated without intent, especially not when the world is watching. So where does that leave us? A father, desperate to protect a crumbling dynasty. A son, torn between legacy and loyalty. A monarchy teetering between tradition and reinvention. And a clock, ticking down to a decision that could either reunite or forever sever one of the most controversial royal figures in modern history. But here's the real kicker. This decision, this showdown, it's already happened once before. Only back then, it wasn't Harry. It was Edward VIII, a king who chose love over duty and nearly destroyed the monarchy in the process. But this time, it's the heir's heir, and the fallout won't just echo through the palace walls. It'll shake the world stage. So what did Harry decide? And what happened, literally 1 minute ago, that sent shockwaves through both Montecito and Buckingham Palace? We're about to find out, because someone inside Clarence's house has just leaked something bigger. And trust me, what comes next will make the abdication look like a family picnic. What really happens when a king closes the doors, lowers his voice, and looks his own son in the eyes, not as a father, but as a sovereign. And more importantly, who else was listening? It was a crisp Tuesday morning in London, the kind where the sky sits heavy and gray above the city like an omen. Clarence's house, elegant and ancient, stood quietly behind its gates, guards posted, windows closed, and inside. A conversation that would change everything. King Charles had summoned Prince Harry, but not through aides, not through assistants. This time, it was personal. A private message had been sent, handwritten, sealed with the royal crest. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a request. It was a command. And when Harry arrived, quietly, unannounced, No motorcade, no uniform. He was met not with tea or polite small talk, but with silence. Chilling, royal silence. The room itself was starkly regal. Heavy curtains drawn. A single table separating father and son. On the wall, a portrait of Queen Elizabeth looked down, watchful, as if already aware of the weight of what was about to unfold. Charles didn't rise to greet him. He simply gestured for Harry to sit. And then, the words. Deliberate. Cold. Final. You must choose, Harry. Full reinstatement or complete separation. There is no third way. Imagine hearing that from your father. Now imagine hearing it not from a parent, but from the King of England. What would you say? What could you say? Harry didn't speak at first. Sources say he blinked. Once, slowly. Then sat back, crossing his arms like a soldier bracing for an incoming blow. And what a blow it was. Because this wasn't the first time they'd had a talk, but it was the first time the tone had shifted from emotional to institutional, from father to monarch, from family to firm. Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. There was no anger, only resignation. The kind that says, I've already made my decision. I'm just giving you the courtesy of hearing it. According to a source close to the palace, Charles laid it out clearly, almost surgically. If you wish to rejoin the royal family, you must return in full. Duties, protocols, obligations. You will cease all independent projects, interviews, memoirs, and public commentary. That includes your wife. Then came the dagger. If not, your titles, your privileges, your status, even your place in the line of succession, may be reviewed and potentially revoked. Permanently. And just like that, the door slammed shut on compromise. Now, let's pause for a second. Because this wasn't a bluff. Charles is known for diplomacy, for long-winded speeches and patient negotiations. But this was different. Because for the first time since becoming king, Charles wasn't reacting. He was leading. And the first major move of his reign, forcing his son to choose between love and loyalty. But why now? Why not last year? Why not wait? Well, according to insider chatter, this wasn't just about Harry anymore. It was about the monarchy's survival. With global interest fading, scandals piling up, and succession questions swirling, Charles had been advised, clean the slate. End the ambiguity. Reassert control. And the first target? The rebel prince who refused to fade quietly. But here's where it gets really wild. Because someone else was in the building. Someone who wasn't supposed to be. A quiet observer. Not a senior official. Not a security detail. Not even a close advisor. A staff member. Anonymous. Invisible. But very much present. And that staffer? They overheard everything. From behind a slightly cracked door, they listened as a father and son debated the future of the crown like two men negotiating a battlefield truce. Here's what they allegedly told a trusted journalist. The king wasn't emotional. He was tired. This wasn't about anger. It was about preserving the monarchy. Harry looked shocked. He didn't expect it to be that final, that cold. But then came the most unsettling quote. At one point, the king said, "If you cannot serve the crown, you cannot claim its protection." That's when Harry went silent. Now think about that for a moment. Protection. That word isn't just about bodyguards or gated estates. It's about identity. It's about security, political, emotional, and literal. So what was Harry really being asked to give up? Everything. And if he said yes, he'd be back under palace control. No independence. No Montecito freedom. No streaming deals. No podcasting. No memoirs. No side deals with producers, ghostwriters, or secret sources. He'd be visible, present, but voiceless. He'd be back in the royal cage, but this time with the door welded shut. But if he said no, then the palace would proceed to scrub him from the system. We're talking about full legal review of all standing privileges, loss of royal protection, no diplomatic immunity while traveling, no state-involved coordination, even the royal trust funds, allegedly tied to certain conditions, might be legally reevaluated. And the most brutal possibility? A public statement confirming that Harry and his children would no longer be considered working members of the royal family in any capacity. That's exile, not just from the institution, from the identity. Now, remember that staffer? The one who overheard it all? They weren't just eavesdropping. They were taking mental notes. Because just hours later, snippets of that conversation started appearing in hushed, off-the-record briefings to reporters. It wasn't a full leak, but it was enough. Enough to set the press spinning. Enough to rattle insiders. Enough to spark a firestorm that exploded online before Harry could even make it back to Heathrow. And that's when another detail emerged. Allegedly, at one point during the conversation, Harry stood up, walked toward the window, and asked a question no one expected. And what about her? Her. Meghan. The ghost in the room. The center of the storm. The lightning rod. And what did Charles say? That's the part the staffer hesitated to repeat. But eventually, they said it was something like, "She made her choice. Now you must make yours." Now imagine hearing that. Your wife, dismissed in a sentence. The mother of your children, reframed as a decision you must weigh. Duty or devotion? History or home? What would you choose? But Harry didn't answer. He just looked out the window. Clarence's house was quiet. Outside, the world kept moving. Tourists walked by. Guards stood silently at their posts. London buses rolled past without knowing that. Inside, the House of Windsor had just suffered a fracture that might never heal. Then, quietly, Harry turned. And with a voice barely above a whisper, he reportedly said, "I'll need time." And Charles? He simply nodded. Not in agreement, but in finality, as if to say, "Take it. But you won't like what comes next." Because the clock had already started ticking. 30 days. One decision. And an entire monarchy on edge. So, did Harry leave that room with a decision? Not quite. But what happened next wasn't up to him. Because just as he stepped out into the hallway, as the door closed behind him, the staffer, the one who overheard it all, they were already on their phone, texting someone. And what they sent would explode into headlines within hours. What happens when a royal secret doesn't stay secret? What happens when someone inside the palace decides the world needs to know? And more importantly, what happens when the leak comes from inside the room? Because just minutes after Prince Harry stepped out of Clarence's house, the fuse had already been lit. A staff member, anonymous, trusted, embedded in royal life, had already made contact. Not with a tabloid, not with a journalist, but with someone even more dangerous. A middle link. The quiet go-between who acts as a shadow broker of royal information. Someone whose phone is filled with encrypted chats, who speaks in code, and who never, ever leaves a digital trail. And within hours, the headlines had cracked open. Ultimatum at Clarence's house. King Charles gives Harry 30 days to decide. The public didn't even know Harry had been in London yet. But now the story was out, and it was spreading like wildfire. But who was behind it? Let's zoom in. Because behind every royal leak is a motive, a grudge, a warning shot, or a calculated move in a much bigger game. And this leak? This wasn't sloppy. This wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, surgical, timed. So who did it? According to whispers from palace corridors, it wasn't a high-ranking aide. It wasn't Camilla's people or William's press secretary. It wasn't even someone from Charles's inner sanctum. It was someone often overlooked. Someone who blends in. A personal assistant? A valet? No, even closer. A royal household staffer. Someone present that day for what should have been a routine appointment. Someone tasked with managing the flow of the day, tea, schedules, privacy. And someone who, by all accounts, was supposed to be out of the room during the conversation. But wasn't. They'd been asked to remove a tray. A seemingly innocent task. And in that brief moment, between stepping in and stepping out, they heard the exchange. Not just snippets, whole sentences. And they remembered every word. But here's the twist. This wasn't their first time leaking. This staffer, according to multiple sources, has acted as a quiet informant for years, feeding sanitized intel to royal-friendly reporters in exchange for protection, cash, and occasionally, favors. But this time, they didn't go to friendly press. They went rogue. Why? Some say guilt. Some say revenge. But one theory is even more chilling. They wanted to warn Harry. Not out of love. Not out of loyalty. But because they believed he had no idea how far Charles was willing to go. Let that sink in. Someone inside Clarence's house believed that Harry was walking into a trap, and they chose to sound the alarm. But here's the irony. The leak? It did more than warn Harry. It sparked chaos. In the UK, in California, and inside the palace itself. Because now, Charles's private ultimatum was a public crisis. And the palace? They scrambled. Within hours, the royal communications team was in full damage control mode. Statements were drafted, then pulled. No comment became the line across the board. But the silence didn't stop the speculation. In fact, it fed it. What exactly had been said? Why was there a 30-day deadline? Was Meghan part of the ultimatum? And perhaps most damning, was Harry being forced to choose between his family and his future? But while the world debated, inside the palace, the search for the leak had begun. A full-scale internal probe. Phones checked, schedules reviewed, entry logs combed. And then, suspicion narrowed in. One name, one person, one staffer who'd been near the door that morning. According to leaked documents later obtained by a foreign outlet, this staffer was relieved of duties less than 72 hours later. No official reason given, but insiders confirmed. It was swift, quiet, and final. They were gone. Gone, but not silenced. Because once they were out, they talked again. And this time, they gave more than whispers. They painted a full picture. They claimed that Charles wasn't just issuing an ultimatum. He was building a legal case. Behind closed doors, the king had allegedly consulted legal advisors about what it would take to formally remove Harry's titles. Duke of Sussex? Gone. His Royal Highness? Gone. Even, according to one bold claim, the possible removal of Harry and Meghan's children from the royal line of succession. Now pause. Let's be clear, that last one, highly controversial, possibly symbolic, maybe even just a threat. But it shows you the depth of what's being discussed behind palace doors. And it shows you why this leak mattered so much. Because without it, Harry might have been blindsided. But with it, the world now knew the pressure he was under. So what did Harry do? That's where things get murky. Because Harry didn't speak. Not right away, but others did. Within 24 hours of the leak, several former Sussex staffers, people once close to Harry and Meghan, started dropping breadcrumbs. One tweeted a cryptic line. They're forcing a hand, but they'll regret what comes next. Another, anonymously, told a journalist, this isn't just a choice. It's a chess move. And Harry's not as outmatched as they think. But the most telling reaction? Meghan's silence. Not a post. Not a press release. Not even a pap walk. Just silence. And that, in itself, sent a message. Because Meghan's always known how to steer the narrative. To shape the headlines. To control the frame. But this time, she was quiet. Which raised the question, was she stunned? Or was she planning? But let's circle back to the leaker for one more twist. Because after disappearing for several days, the staffer reappeared in a stunning way. They reached out, through back channels, to a media personality known for criticizing the royal family, someone with a large international platform, and they handed over something new. Not just quotes, a recording, a short, muffled clip, allegedly captured from the corridor outside the room during Harry and Charles's meeting. You can barely make out the voices, but one phrase, clear as day, Charles, speaking slowly, firmly. You cannot demand freedom and expect the crown to fund it. That's not how it works, Harry. Not anymore. That clip, verified by independent audio experts, was real. And when it hit social media, pandemonium. Because now it wasn't just hearsay. It was proof. Proof that Charles had drawn a line, and that Harry was being forced to decide where he stood. And once again, just like that, the narrative slipped out of palace control. Because the public? They took sides. Some said Charles was right, that Harry had overstepped, that the monarchy had been patient long enough. Others said this was cruel, vindictive, that Charles was weaponizing duty against his own son. But the real bombshell was yet to come, because this staffer, in their final message, said something that set every royal reporter scrambling. You're focused on the ultimatum, but you're missing the real story. The king isn't doing this alone. What did they mean? Who else was pulling the strings? Who stood beside Charles when he delivered the ultimatum? And who, possibly, encouraged it? The answer would lead to someone else. Someone close. Someone powerful. And someone who, quietly, had everything to gain from Harry's final decision. But that revelation? That's what came next. And it would crack the royal family even further. What does it really mean to return to the royal family? Not the fantasy. Not the fairy tale. The real thing. Because when King Charles told Prince Harry, you must choose, he wasn't offering a sentimental homecoming. He wasn't opening the gates of Buckingham Palace with a hug and a wave. He was laying down a contract, a deal, a demand. So let's pull back the curtain on what full royal reinstatement actually looks like in 2025, and why, For Harry, it might be more of a trap than a triumph. Because the truth? This isn't a return. It's a surrender. Let's break it down. 1. The public role. Return to the spotlight, but not on your terms. First and foremost, being a working royal isn't a job. It's a performance. Daily appearances, ribbon cuttings, speeches at schools, hospitals, and foreign embassies. Public smiles. No mistakes. No politics. No emotion. And behind every handshake, there's a team tracking optics, framing narratives, managing damage. For Harry to be reinstated, he wouldn't just walk back into that system. He'd walk back into line. And here's the kicker. It wouldn't be the same role he once had. Insiders claim that any reinstatement would be accompanied by tighter restrictions than before. No media partnerships. No Netflix projects. No podcasting. No deals. Not just for Harry, but Meghan too. Now imagine pitching that to a couple who've built a $100 million brand on not being silent. Would they accept those terms? Would you? 2. Military roles. Restoration comes with strings. One of the most painful blows Harry suffered during Megxit was the loss of his honorary military titles. Captain General of the Royal Marines, Honorary Air Commandant of RAF Honington, Commodore-in-Chief of Small Ships and Diving. Titles that weren't just ceremonial, they were personal. Harry served. He deployed to Afghanistan. He didn't just wear the uniform for photo ops. He earned it. So would reinstatement bring those roles back? Maybe, but not unconditionally. Palace insiders suggest that while Charles might offer military reinstatement as a gesture of goodwill, it would come with caveats. 0 controversy, complete obedience, full-time service. Any public slip-up could risk them being stripped again. And the optics? Brutal. Imagine redonning the uniform under strict supervision, while the media whispers about past betrayals. The symbolism would be powerful. But for Harry, it might feel like wearing a crown of thorns. 3. Titles and branding. The end of Sussex as we know it. Let's talk branding. The Sussex's commercial success hasn't come from being former royals. It's come from being royals in exile. Royals with a story, with drama, with tension. Netflix didn't sign Harry and Meghan for charity campaigns. They signed them for content. Memoirs, interviews, docudramas. The second Harry walks back into the royal fold, that leverage dies. And that means Meghan's lifestyle brand, the media deals, the possible memoir sequels, all of it goes dark. Because no working royal can moonlight as a celebrity entrepreneur. Not anymore. Queen Elizabeth made that clear. Charles, he's doubling down. So if Harry says yes to reinstatement, he's not just walking back into duty. He's walking away from everything they've built. The Spotify era, the archetypes brand, the documentaries, the speeches, they've freedom to speak your truth. Gone. Would you burn the empire you built from scratch, just to be let back in the gates of the one that pushed you out? Would Meghan? Because this offer isn't for 2 people. It's for 1. And the institution, whether it says it or not, has never truly welcomed her. Which brings us to the next brutal layer. For Meghan's role, shadow or spotlight. Here's where things get cold. If Harry returns, what role does Meghan play? According to Palace whispers, none. She wouldn't be invited back into full-time duties. There would be no return to royal patronages, no formal titles, no working duchess status. At best, she'd be adjacent. A spouse. Expected to smile quietly and stay in the background. At worst, she'd be completely sidelined. And let's not forget, this isn't 2018 anymore. Public sentiment in the UK has changed. The honeymoon is long over. If Meghan returns now, she walks into a minefield of tabloid traps, paparazzi hysteria, and vicious commentary. Every appearance dissected, every word scrutinized, and without the protection of a sympathetic press office, she's a sitting duck. Would she tolerate that? Would you? Now imagine trying to sell that to a woman who left the institution precisely because she refused to be silenced. That's not reconciliation. That's erasure. 5. Media restrictions. The muzzle is back. Royal life doesn't just come with a script. It comes with a gag order. Under reinstatement, Harry would be forbidden from discussing royal affairs, both past and present, without explicit approval. No memoirs. No explosive interviews. No off-the-record chats with friends who just happen to work in media. And if he slips, the consequences wouldn't be subtle. Public rebuke. quiet punishments, removal of titles, legal action. And let's not pretend this is hypothetical. The monarchy has punished leaks before. Ask Sarah Ferguson. Ask Prince Andrew. Ask Diana. So if Harry takes the deal, he doesn't just lose his voice. He loses control of his story, his narrative, his past. Everything becomes curated again. And after fighting for 5 years to break free from that system, would he really step back in? Or worse, be forced to? Because some insiders believe this isn't a real offer. It's a trap, a test, a final attempt to either cage him or crush him in the public eye if he refuses. Which brings us to the emotional center of this entire dilemma. 6. The price of peace. Can Harry be a royal and still be himself? Let's put all the politics aside. Let's forget the tabloids, the titles, the lawsuits, the contracts. Let's talk about identity. Who is Harry without the crown? And who is he with it? For years, we've watched him try to answer that question. First as the party prince, then the soldier, then the husband, the father, the exiled duke, the voice of the unheard. He's tried on every version of himself. And now, he's being asked to go back to the first one. But can you ever truly go back? Or does the very act of returning destroy what's left of you? Because if he says yes, he might win back public respect, military honor, family legacy. But he'll lose his freedom. And if he says no, he might keep his voice, but he loses everything else. And what of the children? Would Archie and Lilibet grow up inside the system or forever outside it? Would they be royal by blood, but strangers by circumstance? And that is the knife's edge Harry now walks. Because royal reinstatement isn't a return to safety. It's a return to silence, a palace of rules, a prison of protocol, a life where every smile is scheduled, every moment staged. So when Charles offered this deal, was it a peace offering or a final dare? Because here's the truth. Reinstatement means control, total control. And for a man who just spent 5 years fighting it, that might be the most terrifying offer of all. But here's the real twist. While everyone was focused on Harry's options, return or reject, no one saw what was already happening behind his back, because someone else had already begun preparing the fallout. And they weren't in Montecito. They were sitting just down the hall from the king himself, planning something far more permanent. What does it look like when a royal door doesn't just close, but is bolted shut, sealed, and erased? Because while the world obsessed over whether Prince Harry might return to royal life, no one was prepared for the other half of the king's ultimatum. The darker half, the colder half, the one that didn't come with uniforms, parades, or handshakes. It came with silence. It came with deletion. It came with total separation. Let's be brutally clear here. This wasn't exile. Exile still implies a connection, still implies a thread, however thin. But total separation? It's obliteration. So let's unpack what this option truly meant, not in royal PR terms, but in raw reality. Because when King Charles told Harry, "You must choose," the second path wasn't simply stay in California. It was disappear from the monarchy entirely. 1. Legal disconnection, titles, rights, and the razor edge of royal law. Let's start with the titles. Duke of Sussex was granted by Queen Elizabeth on Harry's wedding day. It's not just symbolic. It comes with royal precedence, historical lineage, and international recognition. But here's the bombshell. That title isn't legally protected forever. It can, under extreme circumstances and with Parliament's involvement, be stripped. And if Harry chose total separation? Sources say the king had already discussed initiating that process. The removal wouldn't just be public, it would be personal. A press release, a formal notice in the court circular, a silent nod that the Queen's gift had been revoked by her successor. And it wouldn't stop with Harry, because if the Duke title goes, so do the stylings for Meghan and the children. Meghan would no longer be a duchess in any formal sense. No longer Her Royal Highness, no longer a titled royal by marriage. Archie and Lilibet, gone from the prince and princess conversation for good. And for a family that fought for those titles to be recognized under Charles's reign, remember that Lilibet was only added to the royal website months after her birth. The message would be devastating. Not just rejection, erasure. 2. Financial severance, trusts, inheritance, and cold accounting. Let's talk money. Because even after Megxit, Harry still had access to financial remnants of royal life. Not handouts, but ties. Royal inheritance. Personal trust funds. Connections to duchy revenues through his father. Charles reportedly funded Harry and Meghan during their transition to the tune of millions. A bridge to a new life. But with total separation, that bridge gets burned. Insiders say Charles would cut all personal financial ties, not out of cruelty, but as a matter of institutional integrity. No more funding, no more support, no future access to duchy properties, royal transport, or logistical security. And it goes deeper. Some speculate that even inheritance terms could shift. Private wills, especially in royal circles, are tightly controlled and, often, conditional. If Harry formally breaks with the monarchy, the assets tied to being a working royal could be redirected elsewhere. To William, to the Crown estate, to charities. What remains might be symbolic. Or nothing. Ask yourself, how far would a father go to protect the image of a dynasty? 3. Line of succession, removal, redaction, or relegation. Now here comes the constitutional nuke. Could Harry, or his children, be removed from the line of succession? Short answer, not easily. The 1701 Act of Settlement outlines who can and cannot succeed to the throne. It would take an act of Parliament to alter it. But, and here's where it gets sinister, removal isn't the only tool. Relegation is. The palace could, without changing the law, publicly reframe the line. Website order shuffled. Names omitted from briefings. Succession language reworded to suggest irrelevance. Think about it. The royal family doesn't need to remove you from the line to make it clear you'll never sit on the throne. They just stop acknowledging it. Out of sight, out of succession, out of history. And the public? They'll follow the cue. 4. Security and state coordination, isolation in plain sight. One of Harry's most publicized battles has been over security. He fought, publicly and legally, for the right to pay for police protection when visiting the UK. The government denied it. But under total separation, not only would the government position hold firm, the palace would cease all coordination, meaning no royal aides to liaise with state departments, no support for logistics, no security briefings, no access to royal residences, not even as a guest. In fact, one source claims that under total separation, Harry would no longer be given advance notice of state events, even funerals or coronations. He'd find out with the public. Imagine that. Your father dies, and the invitation to the funeral never arrives. Because as far as the institution is concerned, you're not family, you're history. 5. Personal isolation, family without function. This is the most painful layer. Because total separation isn't just about titles or protocols. It's about distance. Not just physical, but emotional, psychological, existential. No invites to Trooping the Color. No Christmas at Sandringham. No balcony appearances. No summer retreats at Balmoral. Birthdays pass without acknowledgement. Family events become press stories, not personal memories. And here's the thing. Even if Charles doesn't intend it that way, the machine does. The firm knows how to shut a door. We saw it with Princess Diana, estranged, vilified, surveilled. We saw it with Prince Andrew, removed, redacted, erased. Now, Harry could be next. And the cost? Not just his image, his relationships. With William, with Camilla, even with Kate. Because once you're cast out of the inner circle, every bond becomes transactional. Phone calls feel like press leaks waiting to happen. Private texts become evidence in lawsuits. Trust dies, and the warmth of family turns to frost. 6. The symbolic death. What total separation really feels like. Let's call it what it is. This isn't just professional separation. It's symbolic death. The monarchy functions on symbolism, ceremony, archetype. And when someone is totally cut off, they're not just unemployed. They're uncrowned. Harry would become a ghost prince. Royal by blood, but with no kingdom. Famous, but untethered. A man whose entire identity was once built on duty and legacy, now floating without a flag. And that's the heartbreak. Because no matter what Harry's done, whether you agree with him or not, he didn't choose his birthright. It chose him. And now, it might be taken away, not as punishment, but as purification. Because to protect the monarchy, some believe you have to cut out the infection, even if the infection is your own son. 7. The finality. Once you're out, there's no coming back. This is the harshest truth. Once the king chooses total separation, there's no reset button. No next time. No, let's revisit this in a year. The monarchy doesn't do U-turns. Not without scandal. Not without collapse. So if Harry says no, if he chooses freedom over formality, then it's done. For good. His legacy, his standing, his titles, his rights, everything becomes memory. And the palace? It moves on. Quickly, quietly, brutally. Because that's how survival works. But here's the final twist. While all this was being drafted, prepared, rehearsed, quietly behind the scenes, Harry didn't even know the full scope. Not yet. Because someone close to the king, closer than anyone realized, was orchestrating the terms. Not as a peacemaker, but as an executioner. And when her name came up, it changed everything. What happens when the palace fires a warning shot, and the response doesn't come from a press secretary or a private jet, but from Hollywood? Because the moment word of King Charles's ultimatum hit Montecito, Meghan Markle didn't panic. She planned. She didn't just sit by the phone waiting for Harry to decide between duty and disconnection. She made her own move. And it wasn't subtle. Because while Charles was crafting letters sealed in royal wax, Meghan was picking up the phone to power players, the kind of people the monarchy can't silence. Producers, strategists, lawyers, studio heads, one or two A-list confidants, and maybe, just maybe, someone with more reach than all of them combined. Oprah. Because here's the brutal truth. Meghan never stopped building her empire. Even when the Archetypes podcast vanished. Even when Spotify pulled the plug. Even when the media mocked her for not being marketable enough. She was working. Quietly. Strategically. Ruthlessly. And this royal ultimatum? It wasn't a threat. It was an opening. A chance to flip the narrative. To frame Harry's potential erasure not as shame, but as liberation. So while the British press speculated about palace meetings and titles stripped, Meghan's camp was already laying the groundwork for a comeback. But not a royal one. A Hollywood one. One, the call to action. Meghan's media inner circle. The first move wasn't legal. It was PR. Within hours of the leak, Meghan's communications advisor, a former executive tied to major streaming platforms, was seen dining in Los Angeles with a well-known crisis publicist. Coincidence? Highly unlikely. Because Meghan doesn't leave her public image to chance. Every word, every appearance, every outfit, calculated. And her new playbook? Position Harry not as the prince being pushed out, but as the man bold enough to walk away. Think about it. It's the ultimate American archetype. The man who defies tradition. The couple who challenge the system. The family who escape the castle and find their own kingdom. Meghan knows this story sells. And now, she's rewriting the final act. 2. The Whisper Campaign. Behind closed doors in Hollywood. You won't find this in Variety or Deadline yet. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the chatter. Industry insiders say Meghan's team has begun pitching again. Not just one project. Multiple. A behind-the-scenes documentary on royal life post-exile. A series on female leadership in history, with not-so-subtle parallels. And this one's juicy, a memoir of her own. Separate from Harry's. Told her way. Some say it's in draft form. Others say it's already finished. But one source confirmed this chilling line. If they cut us off, they better be ready for what we kept quiet. Imagine that. The monarchy goes nuclear, and Meghan drops a truth bomb. Not out of revenge. Out of survival. Because if the palace strips their identity, the only weapon left is the story. 3. Reclaiming the narrative. Meghan as the architect. This isn't just damage control. It's reframing. Meghan's team understands the psychology of the audience. They know sympathy shifts. That timing is everything. So instead of fighting the monarchy's terms, they're leaning into them, letting the palace look cold. Detached. Institutional. While Meghan and Harry. Emotional. Human. Relatable. The exiled couple, betrayed by the crown, yet building something better. This isn't an accident. It's a strategy. And it's working. Subtle placements have already started appearing. A flattering feature in a lifestyle magazine. A glowing op-ed about Meghan's charity work. A leaked image of her working behind the scenes. No makeup, hair tied back, sleeves rolled. She's painting herself as the anti-royal royal. Modern. Empowered. Unstoppable. And audiences, especially in America, are eating it up. 4. The Meghan Clause, quiet legal preparations. Now here's the part almost no one is talking about. While PR gears up, Meghan's legal team busy. There are rumors, strong ones, that the Sussex lawyers are preparing what's being called internally the Meghan Clause. What is it? A preemptive legal document. One that asserts Meghan's right to protect her name, brand, and business interests, even if royal titles are stripped. Because here's the twist. While the monarchy can remove titles, they can't erase trademarks already registered. And Meghan? She's got trademarks for days. Archewell, Sussex Royal. Even if it was blocked before, they still have ownership in some territories. Even phrases tied to their documentaries and joint projects. That means if Charles attempts to erase them symbolically, Meghan can still use her image commercially. She's locking down rights. Not to fight royalty, to outlast it. 5. The Oprah variable. The Queenmaker returns? Let's talk Oprah. The last time Meghan and Harry sat across from her, the world stopped. Allegations. Tears. Explosive silence. That interview rewrote royal history in real time. So what if there's another one? A follow-up. A Where Are They Now segment. Or better yet, a live conversation in front of a studio audience. Think it's far-fetched? Then you haven't seen the early-stage talks reportedly happening between Meghan's team and Oprah's producers. Nothing official yet, but sources say there's interest. And more than interest, there's leverage. Because if Charles goes public with a brutal separation, it gives Meghan and Harry the moral high ground to speak. Again, and this time, they'd speak from experience. No longer angry defectors, but fully cut-off survivors. Their words would carry weight, and pain, and possibly truth. 6. The friends in high places factor. Meghan's no longer just a duchess. She's a brand. And that brand has friends. Big ones. Serena Williams, Tyler Perry, Beyoncé, Gayle King, Ellen DeGeneres. These aren't tabloid fixtures. These are power players. And when Meghan moves, they watch. Some speak. Some help. And if the monarchy comes down hard, these people, they will respond. A tweet. A post. A donation. And just like that, the narrative shifts. The palace becomes the villain. The couple becomes the underdog. And the public? They pick sides. Guess which one they choose. 7. The ultimate countermove. We never needed the crown. Now here's the emotional bombshell. According to one insider close to the couple, Meghan's already outlined the central message for any public response. It's not anger. It's not revenge. It's freedom. We never needed the crown. We needed each other. That's the line. That's the spin. And say what you want about spin, it works. Especially when it's rooted in something powerful. Love. Identity. Defiance. Meghan isn't trying to beat the monarchy at its own game. She's changing the game. And if they strip the titles, she won't cry. She'll capitalize. Because unlike the palace, she knows how to play to a global audience. And she knows. They're watching. But here's where it gets even more dangerous. Because while Meghan was launching her counterstrike, someone inside the palace was watching her every move. Not Charles. Not William. Someone who's been underestimated, ignored, dismissed. And now, she's stepping in. Not as an ally, but as a fixer. And her plan? It doesn't involve forgiveness. It involves elimination. What cuts deeper than the crown? A betrayal from someone who once stood by your side. And this time, it wasn't the palace. It wasn't Charles. It wasn't William. It wasn't Camilla. It was a friend. A close one. The kind who knew the passwords. Knew the nicknames. Knew the tears behind the headlines. The kind who was there when Harry and Meghan left the UK in 2020, smiling in photos, lifting bags, making quiet jokes to ease the tension. The kind who texted, "I've got your back," right before the Oprah interview aired. The kind who swore they'd never speak to the press. Until they did. And when they spoke, it wasn't just gossip. It was a knife to the gut. Because what they revealed, what they chose to reveal, changed everything. Let's rewind. The leak about King Charles's ultimatum had just exploded. The press was foaming. Public opinion was divided. Meghan's Hollywood team was moving fast. And Harry? He'd gone dark. No photos. No statements. No sources. Just silence. But in that silence, a voice broke through. Not a palace insider. Not a royal aide. A friend. Or a former friend. Let's call him X for now. Male. Mid-30s. Private school background. Once described in an article as Harry's civilian rock. Not famous, not flashy, but trusted. And for years, X had been one of the few constants in Harry's orbit. At the Invictus Games, on boys' trips, even quietly visiting the Sussexes in California, allegedly helping them navigate media chaos during their transition. So why did X betray him? That's the question everyone's asking. But the better question is, what did he say? Because X didn't give a fluff interview. He gave receipts, emails, screenshots, voice notes, some from Harry himself, others from group chats with mutual friends dating back years. And in one interview, granted anonymously to a high-profile UK journalist, X spilled a secret that stunned even seasoned royal reporters. Harry had already been quietly reaching out to the palace weeks before Charles issued the ultimatum. Wait, what? Harry? Reaching out? That wasn't part of the narrative. But X claimed it was true. That Harry, on his own, had been attempting a private channel back into the royal system. Not to return fully, not to surrender, but to talk, to explore options. Maybe for a hybrid role, maybe to repair ties with William, maybe to find a way for his kids to have some connection to their heritage. And the real twist? Meghan didn't know. According to X, Harry had kept these overtures private, out of fear, out of guilt, out of hope. And then Charles delivered the ultimatum, publicly, brutally, irrevocably. And that hope? Shattered. Now ask yourself, why would Harry hide something so major from Meghan? Was it a tactical decision? Or was he testing the waters, terrified that Meghan would see it as betrayal? That's the emotional center of this entire revelation. Because for the first time in 5 years, it seemed like Harry himself was split in two. One part of him, the Montecito Harry, was loyal to Meghan, to freedom, to their new life. But another part still longed for a bridge back, not to the system, but to his roots. And the moment Charles cut off the option, that longing curdled into something darker, something silent, something dangerous. But here's where it gets worse. Because X didn't just stop at emails and feelings. He claimed there was more. That other royals, including William, had been aware of Harry's quiet overtures. That meetings had been floated, tentative ideas discussed, a possible role in a veterans initiative, a charitable partnership with the Palace Foundation, even a private dinner to test the waters between the brothers. All of it real, all of it private, and all of it crushed by the ultimatum. So now the question was, who shut it down? Was it Charles? Was it Camilla? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone who wanted Harry's return blocked permanently? X hinted at this, but wouldn't say the name. Not yet. But then came the second betrayal. Because X didn't just talk to one journalist. He went to the press. An exclusive was sold, allegedly to a European tabloid with a reputation for breaking royal scandals. And in that exclusive, photos of Harry, looking downcast, alone, walking near the beach in California. They weren't recent, but they were strategic. Because the story they ran with wasn't about reconciliation. It was about regret. Prince Harry tried to come home, but it was too late. That was the headline. And beneath it, subtext that screamed, he's the prince who chose wrong. Now he wants back in. But the door's shut. And Meghan? She's moving on. It was a narrative shift. One Meghan's team immediately pushed back on. Within 12 hours, multiple outlets ran soft-focus stories on Meghan's recent charitable appearance. No mention of Harry's regret. Just family time, growth, and new beginnings. But for royal watchers, the message was clear. A crack had formed. Not in the palace. In the Sussex camp. And X's betrayal? It didn't just expose Harry's private doubts. It sparked a domino effect. Suddenly, other ex-friends began talking. A former aide, an army buddy, a charity colleague. All of them echoing similar themes. He's torn. He misses the structure. He's exhausted. He doesn't feel home anywhere. And perhaps most damning of all, he never expected Meghan to thrive without him. And now he's scared she might. That quote hit like a bomb. Because it raised a terrifying question. Was Harry now the outsider in both worlds? Not royal enough for the palace. Not independent enough for Montecito. Just floating. But if that sounds like rock bottom, it's not. Because the final blow came from someone even closer. A godparent. Not of Archie or Lilibet, but of Harry himself. A respected royal figure. Older. Private. Trusted. They didn't speak publicly. But a carefully worded statement, issued through a family lawyer, landed in the inbox of a top London columnist. It read, Choices come with consequences. Harry must live with his. But loyalty, once fractured, rarely returns whole. That wasn't just a quote. That was a eulogy. A eulogy for the bond that once connected Harry to his second family. The tight-knit circle of friends, protectors, and allies who saw him through his wildest days, his darkest hours, his military service, and his wedding. Now, gone. And the timing couldn't be worse. Because as Harry stood silently, watching the public dissect his doubts, his family prepare to erase him, and his wife fortify their empire, someone else had started planning. Not for drama, not for a scandal, but for a removal. Because as damaging as friends can be, enemies with a strategy, they're deadly. And the one now stepping forward? She's not just strategic. She's royal-blooded. And she's had enough. What if someone didn't speak, but still screamed? Because in a world where every royal step is scrutinized, where every raised eyebrow becomes a headline, and every absence ignites a frenzy, silence isn't peace. It's strategy. And in the middle of the storm, betrayals, ultimatums, leaks, and back-channel warfare. Prince Harry made a move so subtle, so deceptively quiet, that most people missed it. But those who noticed? They knew instantly. This wasn't an accident. This was a signal. A message, not to the public, not even to the press, but to the firm. And perhaps, to Meghan. Let's break it down. It happened on a Wednesday morning in Santa Barbara. Cool air. Low clouds. Just another normal day in California. Harry was photographed, intentionally or not, walking alone outside a well-known local center. No security in sight. No children. No dogs. No entourage. Just Harry. Hoodie. Cap pulled low. Phone in hand. But here's where it gets strange. He wasn't scheduled to be there. No charity event. No known meeting. But this location? It's less than 3 blocks from the U.S. office of a crisis mediation firm, one with known ties to UK government liaisons. Coincidence? That's what some wanted you to think. But then came the first photo. Leaked. Grainy. Black SUV nearby, license plates blurred. Harry, standing outside a nondescript door. And just visible? A folder. Tucked under his arm. Plain white. No markings. Except for one thing. A single, visible word, partially exposed from the side pocket of the folder. It read, reintegration. Now stop. Take that in. Reintegration? Not a word people use casually. Not in law. Not in therapy. Not in royal life. But in royal military circles? It's loaded. Reintegration refers to the process of returning a soldier to civilian or official service. Retraining, reassessment, psychological preparation. It's a protocol. And in this context, it set royal insiders buzzing. Why was Harry walking around Montecito with a folder containing that word? Was it a hint? Was it bait? Or was it a signal to the palace that he was ready? But ready for what? To return? To negotiate? To surrender? That's where interpretations split. Some royal commentators said it was a sign of peace, a subtle gesture that Harry was still open to dialogue, still hopeful. Others, especially those close to Meghan's camp, saw it differently. They believed it was a warning, a way of saying, if I wanted to come back, I could, and you'd better think twice before shutting the door. But here's where it gets even more layered. Because that same day, a seemingly unrelated post appeared on the official royal family website, buried deep in the site. Among minor announcements was a quiet edit. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex page had been updated. Not erased. Updated. The wording shifted. No longer did it say former working members of the royal family. Now it read, currently residing abroad. The Duke and Duchess maintain personal and philanthropic engagements independently. No mention of status. No mention of separation. Just neutrality. Gray area. Limbo. Now ask yourself, why that language? And why now? One theory is that the palace saw Harry's signal and paused. Another theory is even bolder. Harry himself authorized the edit. Through back channels. Through his remaining contacts. As a test. To see how the public would respond. And respond they did. Social media lit up. Royal forums exploded. Twitter, or whatever name it goes by now, trended with hashtag reintegration and hashtag Harry returns. Some hailed it as the start of healing. Others saw it as betrayal. And one bold headline from a conservative tabloid shouted, Prince Harry begs for return. Which, of course, wasn't remotely true. But it got clicks. And more importantly, It hit a nerve. Because while the world debated the folder, the walk, and the website edit, something else was happening. Quietly, behind the scenes, Harry had scheduled a veterans roundtable, a private event he hadn't publicized. Attendees? Several senior figures from UK and US veterans organizations. And one former Royal Marine, long thought to be estranged from Harry, was there too. When asked afterward what they discussed, the Marine replied, "We talked about unfinished business. And legacy. Legacy. That word again. The one thing that still ties Harry to his past. To the monarchy. To his mother." And that's when people started asking, was this about family? Or about restoration? Was Harry truly trying to rebuild bridges? Or was he laying the foundation for a new kind of royal role? One he could define? A civilian prince. Globally engaged. Unofficial. Untouchable. A royal with no palace. But here's the real twist. That same week, a British intelligence source, anonymous, but verified, told a foreign journalist, "There's chatter within certain government circles about contingency protocols should the Sussexes attempt a formal re-entry." Contingency protocols? Let that sink in. The British government was preparing for something. A possible return. A public shift. A reintegration, on Harry's terms, or the monarchy's. And Meghan? Still silent. No statements. No interviews. No press appearances. Just a single photo posted to a friend's Instagram story. Meghan, smiling over coffee, a stack of business documents beside her. Caption: "Building something beautiful." So what was really happening? Had Harry and Meghan split strategies? Was he quietly negotiating his legacy while she strengthened her brand? Or were they playing a longer game? A coordinated silence. A psychological chess match. Move. Countermove. Message. Countermessage. And the palace? They were nervous. You could see it in the press responses. The royal rota went from snarky to serious overnight. One senior commentator wrote, "If Harry returns under his own framework, it could destabilize the monarchy."